Hello students, welcome to Recitals in Depth. Herein, we will cover the international relations August 2024 current affairs topics in detail. The broader themes which we are going to cover are as follows: important state visits, sustainable use of energy resources, global labor governance, important dialogues and mechanisms, cybersecurity and its governance, and bilateral relations. Contribution of Indian Americans to US society and economy. Recently, a report by the name of Small Community, Big Contributions and Boundless Horizons. This report came into being and this was released by the US-based not-for-profit organization named Indiaspora. Right? So it highlighted what is the contribution of Indian Americans to the society of US and also to the economy of the United States. So with respect to our exam, this is particularly important because Indian diaspora and its contribution in various countries forms an important part of our syllabus. So let us note down the facts important with respect to the bilateral relationship between India and America. So let us now see what is the contribution of Indian diaspora. First is with respect to population and migration. As the report says that Indian Americans are a small community of people. The population of Indian Americans is 5.1 million. To put it into perspective, in percentage terms, it is just 1.5% of US population. So, this is a considerably small community making big impacts. With respect to migration, before 2000, 30% of the population had migrated to US. And it was after 2010, the 45% of the population migrated to the United States. So, most of them are concentrated in the states of New York and California. So, what is the big impact that they are creating? The economic impact. First is with respect to startups. That is, out of the 648 unicorn that are there in United States, 72 are led by Indian Americans. Right? So collectively, they produce a revenue of $195 billion and provide employment to about 55,000 people. In percentage terms, this is 13% of the total unicorn employees in the startups of United States. Then with respect to industry, there is a dominance in hotel industry. Why? Because close to 60% is being owned by Indian Americans. And this has also led to considerable employment. Around 4 million jobs are being created because of this kind of business growth that the Indian community provides in US. Then taxes and spending. With respect to taxes, Indian American community generates a tax revenue of $300 billion for United States, and considerable amount of spending is also there that comes down to $370 to $460 billion. So this pushes the economy as well as a society with respect to providing employment in certain industries or with respect to the startups and also to the economy through various tax revenue or the spending. It provides for a bigger impact, that is by a small community of Indian Americans in United States. Again, in academic and research institutions, the top positions in 35 of 50 US colleges are held by Indians. Indian Americans have also contributed to the academic research by being a co-author of 13% of the journals being published in US. Right? And there is also a considerable donation that is given by Indian American community to these academic research institutions as well. Talking about donations, there is considerable amount of philanthropy also. The Indian American community donates close to $1.5 billion to $2 billion annually towards charity organizations. There is a specific day that is called India Giving Day, that is organized by India Philanthropic Alliance, which gives forward as a charity for the causes that are faced in India itself. Right? Even with respect to governance, there have been considerable contributions of the Indian American community that comes in the form of federal administration. So Indian Americans have held notable positions since 2015. There were 60 notable positions held by Indian American community in 2015, and it has increased to over 150 in 2023. And it includes the Vice President Kamala Harris, who was the first female to hold that position in the office. Not only the governance in the federal administration of US, even with respect to global governance, Indian diaspora has been helpful. When it comes to Ajay Banga being the president of World Bank, or Dr. Geeta Gopinath, who is the first deputy managing director of IMF. Right? So this was the contribution of Indian diaspora to US society and economy. Two new US-India agreements. The recent visit of Defense Minister to United States led to signing of two new agreements, namely Security for Supply Arrangement and also Memorandum of Agreement for Assignment of Liaison Officers. So this is a particularly big step when it comes to defense cooperation between the two nations. It also pushes forward for co-production of defense equipments and also technologies when it comes to producing unmanned platforms, munitions, and so on. Let us have a look at this issue. So, Indo-US defense cooperation. First of all, what is the purpose of having such a defense cooperation in place? First, it is to address mutual interests and also to ward off any security concerns. Therefore, both of these countries find some ways to cooperate in the defense sector, so this purpose is met. With respect to defense cooperation, so far with respect to US, in 2002, G. Somya was signed between India and US. This is particularly important for sharing of military information and classified technologies. Right? After that, the negotiations with respect to defense cooperation took a long time, and in 2016, US designated India as its major defense partner. This also led to, in 2016 itself, signing of LIMUA. This is a mutual logistics support agreement, which means that India and America, both of them will support each other as far as the maritime exercises are concerned with respect to the logistics part of it, like refueling of the warships. Then in 2018, India and America signed COMCASA. So this was another agreement which enabled that there must be some amount of interoperability between the communication systems of India and American defense equipments, right? Come 2020, there was signing of BICA as well. BICA means that there would be information sharing with respect to geospatial information, particularly in the form of maps, nautical charts, imagery, and so on, right? So all of these have led to defense cooperation up until now, when we are now moving forward with defense industrial cooperation. That is, these kind of agreements have just led to interoperability between the defense systems of India and US. Now we are moving forward from interoperability, that is smooth interaction between the two defense systems. Now we are moving forward to defense commerce, right? Which will involve the private sectors also. It will involve co-development of defense equipment as well. So now in this context, let us see what were the new agreements that were signed. The first is security of supply arrangement. That is, India and America, they go forward with reciprocal priority support. This support is given to each other as and when the need arises in the critical defense equipments, right? So this will enable the use of the various resources, that is industrial resources. It will provide for access to such resources whenever there is a slack of them and wherever there is a supply disruption. So this kind of agreement will address the supply disruption when there is a threat with respect to lack of accessibility to such supply in the defense domain by either of the countries, right? So it will ensure that security is not threatened by the lack of defense technologies present at that point of time. The supply would always be ensured, right? This agreement is not legally binding, right? There won't be repercussions if such kind of supply is not met, right? So this was one of the agreements that was signed. Then there is this another agreement, or reciprocal defense procurement arrangement. Now this has not been signed yet. However, it is in the pipeline. That is, there are talks that it might be signed by the end of this year 2024. Now what is this defense procurement arrangement? It means that the foreign companies, that is from both defense companies of America as well as defense companies of India, they can invest and they can participate in the contracts bid by the respective countries. That is, Indian defense company can bid for a contract for the US, right? However, this is legally binding, okay? and for Indian companies to go forward and bid for contracts to sell to the United States, it needs to be signed by India, right? So this kind of reciprocal defense procurement arrangement is also called as free trade agreement in defense. So this is the next step which comes after securing the supply arrangements under security of supply arrangement agreement, right? So with respect to free trade agreement in defense under reciprocal defense procurement arrangement, there is a particular concern because within the defense sphere, it is the US companies that dominate it, and therefore it might result into the annihilation or being dominated of the domestic defense industries of India. Also, there is a cause of concern because in the regulations by the US government, it is said that within these defense equipments, the development may take place, the co-development may take place. However, there has to be 75% of domestic equipments being used in this production, and that has to be done by the year 2029. So these are some of the limitations, and probably we are going to negotiate with it in the coming reciprocal defense procure arrangement, which is in pipeline right now. Now there is also a memorandum of agreement on liaison officers. Now this is again a step forward in defense information sharing. That is, there must be a coordinating or communicating officer which must be present so that there is a continuous channel of communication between Indian and US organizations, right? So this liaison officer has to be a part of Indian Armed Forces. And he would be placed at the key strategic commands of the United States. So these were the new agreements between India and US, particularly with respect to the defense cooperation. Second, India-Singapore Ministerial Roundtable. Now, this roundtable has become a pivotal platform for enhancing the bilateral relations between both of these countries. Particularly, this becomes important when it comes to the mutual cooperation in critical areas. Singapore is a major foreign direct investment, that is FDI contributor to India. So it becomes important in discussion so that economic relations and other sectors are also being considered. So let us have a discussion on it. So let us understand what is the significance of ISMR. The first is there is strategic significance, that is, it is a high level meeting, right? Because of various ministries being involved, right? It is a strategic significance, that is, India and Singapore want to collaborate over various sectors, right? So it is of strategic significance. Then comes the form of economic significance, because Singapore was the largest FDI contributor. Now India would want to utilize this contribution in its foreign direct investments in particular areas so that the enhancement of its economy takes place. And this is also conducive with the Singaporean companies that want to further invest in India in the future. So FDI contribution of Singapore was important, and this results into a conduction of a roundtable. So for Singapore, it was $11.77 billion that was invested. Thirdly, there has been expansion of bilateral ties. It is also a step towards expanding whatever bilateral relations they have with each other. So this becomes particularly significant when it comes to India-Singapore relations, right? So what are the key focus areas between these two nations when ISMR is concerned? One is digitalization and connectivity. Now, both of these countries recognize the globalization that has been taking place, and they recognize that there has been what can be called as interconnectedness of economies, right? So as far as these two nations are concerned, they want to smoothen this process of globalization between the two countries, particularly when the foreign direct investment is concerned. So this has to be addressed. Then comes skilled development and advanced manufacturing. Now, both of these nations also recognize that there has to be modernization of industries, and for that there has to be a continuous upskilling of labor force, right? So there has to be upskilling, and this would require that there must be skill development. There must be procedures to develop our labor force in the manner we want to address the industrial requirements. And there is also a push towards advanced manufacturing. Manufacturing creates the largest number of employment and pulls the labor force into the GDP of the country. Sustainability and healthcare. Now, this industrial development or the investment that is being put into the industries is not without sustainable developmental goals. They both are parties to sustainable developmental goals that have to be reached by 2030. And they want to achieve all of these focus areas sustainably, right? Sustainably meaning that not only their economic and social welfare are met, but also it should not harm the environment. Right? All of these things are to be addressed when it comes to sustainability and healthcare. Right? So this was the key focus area of second ISMR. Now, just for a few examples and comparison, let us understand what is the FDI landscape. So Singapore is the largest FDI contributor to India, and it contributes $11.77 billion. This has been in financial year 23-24, right? In the same financial year, US has contributed close to $11 billion. Japan has contributed to $8 billion. So this also emphasizes on the importance of having this kind of ISMR, right? With respect to Singapore, so what are the examples of its investments? With respect to Singapore, a prominent example would be Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor. This is with respect to Singaporean investments to improve the logistical efficiencies in these industrial corridors, right? Then for US, the investments have come in the form of enhancing information technology and also strengthening research capabilities. US has also found FDI in India through pharmaceuticals. Right? Similarly, for Japan, it has been technology and infrastructure development. Right? So this gives us a FDI, a comparative nature of how FDI is being utilized, how the countries are finding various sectors in which they can invest their money in India, right? So this is a comparative. So what are the unique aspects of India-Singapore relations? The first comes in the form of convergence of security interest, and that is the strategic strength of this relation. It is in the form of being a member of multiple organizations that have similar or same objectives. For example, both of these countries are a part of G20, Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, and East Asia Summit. Right? This is one of the strategic strength that both of these countries have, whether they want to collaborate on the basis of finance, economics, whether they want to collaborate on the basis of security interest. There has been a convergence that is observed. Right? Apart from this, there has been economic relations as well. Why? First of all, FDI contribution of Singapore is $11.77 billion in financial year 23-24, and this is a significant contribution into various sectors of economy of India. Right? Apart from this, Singapore provides for a financial hub because of its conducive policies and business environment for the Indian companies. So it is a fact that there are close to 4,000 Indian companies in Singapore that are operating there. And it is also particularly important because of the diaspora that resides there. Indian diaspora that is close to 9%. This means that 9% of Singaporean population is Indian. Right? So this is the economic diplomacy. The third is technological innovation. This is particularly with respect to the modern technologies like 5G, cyber, and the concerns related to such kind of technologies, cyber security, semiconductor industries. So there has been a particularly collaboration when it comes to technological innovation between both of these countries. That is, there are multiple Singaporean companies that are operating on the Indian ground in the semiconductor market. So this is about the ISMR, that is the relations between the India and Singaporean community. India-Japan 2+2 dialogue. Recently, the third 2+2 dialogue between India and Japan was held in New Delhi. Now this was particularly because of the increasing geopolitical tensions as well as China's assertive behavior in the Indo-Pacific region. So this called for a mutual dialogue, which is in the form of 2+2 dialogue between India and Japan to cooperate on various sectors of defense and security related issues. Let us have a discussion on this issue. So what were the key highlights of this 2+2 dialogue? The first is with respect to the region, Indo-Pacific. Both these nations, India and Japan, push for a free, open and rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific region. This is because they support the freedom of navigation of ships but also not violate the sovereignty of any country. Right? So both these countries push for free, open, rules-based order. And this is in line with the UN clause, that is law of seas. Right? There has also been an observation, collective observation by both of these countries that there has been an increasing Chinese influence within this region. So there has been increasing military influence. Now it can manifest in various forms such as acquiring of ports. For example, China has acquired Hambantota port from Sri Lanka. Then there has been access of ports in Africa as well, that is Djibouti port, right? And of course in Pakistan they have Gwadar. Djibouti in Africa and Hambantota. right? So it has been manifested in this kind of a form, and it influences the countries within this region. Now, there has also been regional cooperation. Now, to counter such kind of an activity, India and Japan collectively also want to go forward and collaborate with the countries that are found in this region. And one of the best cooperation would come into the form of ASEAN. That is the Southeast Asian nations. It is the association of Southeast Asian nations. So, both India and Japan recognize that it can contribute, these nations can contribute to the protection and preservation of Indo-Pacific region through cooperation and increasing stability. So, they want to ensure that such kind of a collaboration along with the regional partners also take place. That is why this 2+2 dialogue becomes even more significant, because it wants to reach out to the other countries in the region. Then, with respect to security, so both India and Japan are a part of Quad group. That is Quad, which consists of countries like Japan, US, Australia and India. Now, within this, they want to have a framework so that the security of Indo-Pacific region is ensured, right? So, they are also planning for holding such kind of meetings in the future as well. Then another security cooperation would come in the form of having third party, right? So if there is a third party country, if there is a third country who has issues or who has their sovereignty that is being violated because of other nation in this region, then they would collectively, that is India and Japan would collectively help this third party. So this is also a thing that is being addressed. Then defense. Both these countries have also emphasized on the defense exercise that they have held together. So whether it is in the form of GMEX or Shinyu Maitri, or it is in the form of Malabar exercise. So Malabar exercise takes place not only between India and Japan but also includes Australia and the United States. So this was what was emphasized in this 2+2 dialogue. Another issue that they have also observed and plan to take action on is terrorism and extremism. Now, India and Japan both condemn cross-border terrorism. Cross-border terrorism comes in India mainly from its neighboring nations and mainly from Pakistan. So, this dialogue condemns such kind of cross-border terrorism. Secondly, they also want to and plan to eliminate safe havens for the terrorists. For example, Jaish-e-Mohammed, example ISIS or Lashkar-e-Taiba, all of these safe havens for these terrorists, those grounds which breed such kind of terrorism should be eliminated at the earliest. This is what they have planned in this dialogue as well. So let us now understand what are 2+2 meetings. So as it says here, it is a high level diplomatic engagement. It is high level because it happens at the ministerial level, that is India and Japan. Both of these nations, foreign and defense minister. Similarly, Japan's foreign and defense minister will hold a dialogue in these 2+2 meetings. That is why it is called a high level diplomatic engagement. And what are they going to talk about? It is mainly related to strategic, defense and security related issues. This is what they are going to talk about in depth in these kind of meetings, right? So why should India and Japan, or rather India and any country, go for a 2+2 partnership? So the reason, the purpose of such kind of 2+2 partnership can be dual in nature. One could be to enhance bilateral relations between the two nations, right? That is, they want to increase whatever relationship that they have had in the past and also collaborate with the relations they want to have in the future, right? The second purpose can be to address mutual concerns. Now, both of these countries may have concerns when it comes to collectively thinking about their own future, right? So they also want to collaborate with each other and address such kind of mutual concerns that may happen in the future. So this is also a platform to address these kind of issues. So the purpose is clear. The purpose one could be to enhance whatever bilateral relations they have had in the past and also focus upon how to build upon and strengthen those kind of relations. The second thing would be to address whatever mutual concerns they have in the future and try to eliminate those concerns. Now, does India have other 2+2 partners? Yes. So one example is US. So with US, India had a 2+2 partnership since 2018. That is, it is the oldest partner when it comes to 2+2 meetings, right? So India and US also has it. Then India has a 2+2 with Russia as well. This started in 2021. And as we talked about the purpose of 2+2 meetings, with respect to Russia, it is about recognizing a multipolar world. What does this mean? It means that there can be multiple power centers and there can be domination of multiple countries. That is, in effect, there must be interconnectedness and there should not be a dominance of just one country, whether it is with respect to economics or whether it is respect to the defense or military strength, right? So with respect to Russia, it is the purpose is multipolar world. Along with this, there are other nations also with which we have our 2+2 dialogue. Examples are Brazil, Australia, United Kingdom, right? So this is about the 2+2 meetings. So what is the significance of ASEAN? Because ASEAN has become a focal point when it comes to increasing the cooperation and stability within the Indo-Pacific region. So for India, it can be said that it is pursuing its Act East policy when dealing with the Southeast Asian nations. For Japan, it comes in the form of being a member of RCEP, that is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership of Japan with the ASEAN nations, right? With respect to Act East policy, India wants to associate itself with the Southeast Asian nations in the form of regional connectivity. The prime example being India, Myanmar, Thailand trilateral highway, right? Apart from this, India also wants to engage in trade with the Southeast Asian nations. So it must be noticed here that India is not a part of RCEP, which Japan is a part of, right? India has certain reservations when it comes to being a member of RCEP because it wants to avoid the dominance of Chinese influence and their products in the Asian markets as well. So they want to avoid it and therefore they have not been a part of RCEP. But still they can get into bilateral arrangements with the countries in Southeast Asia. So trade is also a focal point when it wants to associate itself with the Southeast Asian nations. Apart from this, it also wants to increase its geopolitical influence. Last month we read about the Belt and Road Initiative of China. Belt and Road Initiative of China also finds its place in the Southeast Asian nations. Particularly, we read about Malaysia, right? And therefore, the geopolitical influence has been increasing for as far as China is concerned. India also wants to enhance and also counter this kind of a geopolitical influence that China has within this region, right? For Japan, RCEP, Japan is one of the major trading partners of Southeast Asian nations, right? Apart from that, Japan has also contributed to their economy through multiple investments in the region and also developmental aid, right? This is what Japan has done for the Southeast Asian nation. So it is clear that both India and Japan have interest in the Southeast Asian nations, that it is on the blueprint of their policy. And collectively, if they are facing concerns when it comes to the Indo-Pacific region, then they would want to collaborate with these Asian nations to ensure that there is regional stability. And also there is elimination of threats that are particularly important when it comes to regional connectivity, when it comes to trade, when it comes to geopolitical influence, or for Japan, when it comes to investments and its developmental aid in relation with the Southeast Asian nations. So with respect to the purpose of 2+2 meetings, now having seen what the focal point or what the mutual concern is with respect to the Indo-Pacific region and how India and Japan are trying to collaborate and find measures to address the same, let us also understand how it is strengthening the bilateral ties between both of these nations, right? The first comes in the form of defense and security cooperation, that is between both of these nations. Defense and security cooperation. So the ongoing challenges has not been a feature of present, but it has also occurred in the past, and therefore India and Japan have gone into partnerships, whether it is a strategic partnership or it is a partnership at the global level. So this kind of partnership had started way back in 2008. One particular agreement that both of these countries have signed is in the form of AXA. Right? AXA is acquisition of cross-servicing agreements. Right? So both of these countries have agreed to provide for supplies and services as far as defense and security of each other is concerned. Right? So it will provide for supplies and services, right? It is an agreement which is like a reciprocation of each other's care when it comes to maritime or defense related exercise. Right? Apart from this, there has been economic relations between both of these countries, particularly in the form of trade, that is India and Japan. With respect to India, Japan is the 13th largest trading partner of India. Also, Japan has found its way to invest close to 5 trillion yen in the coming 5 years in various developmental projects of India. Talking about the developmental aid, India is the largest recipient of official developmental assistance from Japan, and particularly it has invested in what is popularly recognized infrastructure, that is in the form of Delhi Metro, right? There has also been cultural exchanges between both of these nations, and this comes from the ancient times as well. That is, they have Buddhist populations, right? The countries that have Buddhism as a religion. Apart from this, they have this sister city concept. Right? There is one city that is from India, that can be Ahmedabad, and then there is another city from Japan. Both of these collaborate and increase whatever tourism potential they can. This will also enhance the peaceful relations that these cities will have with each other, right? So this is the contribution to the bilateral ties, and it is also said that these kind of 2+2 dialogue will further increase and strengthen the bilateral ties both of these countries have with each other, right? India allows Nepal to export an additional 251 megawatts of power. Now, this is particularly significant. One, because Nepal is a neighborhood country which has border sharing with India. And secondly, because there has been a political turmoil that has been going in Nepal. Now, this political turmoil leads to candidates who are being as the Prime Minister. They may have a tilt towards Indian interests, or they may have a tilt towards the Chinese interests, right? So, the present Prime Minister, KPS Sharma Oli, is someone who has a hardline stance towards India, but is warming up to the relations with China. So, in this context, this kind of a trade, particularly power trade in South Asia, becomes extremely important. Let us understand this issue. Now, there has been regional energy cooperation. So, energy cooperation between India and Nepal. Earlier, there were 16 projects that had led to import of 690 megawatt of power from Nepal. Now, it has been expanded to 28 projects. And now we are importing 941 megawatt of power. Now, this is the difference. This is 251 megawatt that we are now additionally importing as electricity from Nepal, right? Then there is strategic importance of such kind of a decision. Why? One, with respect to Nepal. Nepal has turned into a net exporter of energy. Now, this is particularly important for its economy. They have generated a revenue of 16.93 million Nepali rupees through this energy trade, right? So, it becomes very important for economics of Nepal. With respect to India, it is important. Why? Because it is something that India wants to add to its clean energy program. Secondly, it also wants to diversify because India has been already importing hydroelectricity from Bhutan, and it also wants to expand to Nepal as a resource. This is also important as far as the geopolitics, that is with respect to China, is concerned. India also wants to have a strong hold in Nepal, right? Apart from that, there is the neighborhood first policy. This is also something that India would like to strengthen through such kind of additional trade in electricity. So, what is the significance of HPO framework? HPO stands for Hydropower Purchase Obligation, right? So, Electricity Act of 2003 says that center or state can prescribe that the DISCOMs have to procure certain amount of electricity from the renewable energy sources, right? So, center or state can prescribe such amount of percentage of electricity that has to be procured from renewable energy. This is particularly important because we are also trying to promote renewable energy as a part of our NDCs or Panchamrita goals. Right? So, if they are possessing such kind of renewable energy sources and they are procuring it from those sources, then they would be awarded with certain certificates. That is the renewable energy certificates that will certify that this much energy, electricity was sourced from renewable sources. Right? Now, if a DISCOM, that is a distributing company of electricity, it does not possess such kind of renewable energy certificates, then they will get penalized under the renewable purchase obligations if they are not having such kind of certificates. However, it is a tradable entity. RECs are tradable, right? Which means that even if some DISCOM does not possess the required RECs, then also they can purchase it from other DISCOMs who have surplus of these certificates, right? So we have a market of RECs as well, and this will cater to the renewable purchase obligations that the DISCOMs have. Now, apart from this, there is also hydropower purchase obligation. That is, it is not just that we want to expand in the renewable energy sources. It is also the form in which the renewable energy sources have to be developed. And for that, we have hydropower purchase obligations. Otherwise, solar energy would have been the most go-to options for the sourcing of renewable energy. However, we also want to develop our hydropower potential and the sources that we have for procuring the renewable energy. So, hydropower purchase obligation would come within this, and a certain percentage has to be procured within the electricity consumption through these hydropower purchase obligations, right? Now, earlier, what had happened that the states could meet their HPO requirements through domestic hydropower resources only, right? It was earlier provided under this act that only domestic hydropower resources would be utilized to answer whether they have obligated to HPOs or not. However, having this framework with Nepal, it has been expanded. That is, HPO now can be sourced from Nepal also. This will also be counted when hydropower purchase obligations are assessed. That is, if a DISCOM has hydropower purchase obligations, then it must be sourced from domestic. But now it has been expanded and said that even the HPO that is being sourced from Nepal, it will also be counted within these obligations, right? So this is the significance of HPO framework. So this is particularly important when it comes to Nepal, because we have signed a long-term agreement. Long-term agreements for hydropower, that is, we will procure 10,000 megawatt in the coming 10 years, right? This is a long-term agreement that has been signed between India and Nepal. Also, it is significant because there is a medium-term agreement between India and Nepal, particularly with the states of Bihar and Haryana, right? So these two states will also procure the electricity from the hydropower that is generated in Nepal, right? So this is also a medium-term agreement. It shows localized cooperation for these kind of projects that are decided or agreed upon at the level of nations, right? So what is the overall assessment of such a trade? The first is HPO framework. Now it helps us to diversify. Diversify on what? One is the source of renewable energy, right? Because there has been excessive focus on one form of energy, for example, solar energy. Now we are trying to diversify the other as well, and we are exploring what potential hydropower electric projects have. Right? Second diversification comes in the form of production source. So it shows that we are not just focused upon expanding hydroelectric potential domestically, but we are also collaborating with nations, other nations like Nepal, Bhutan, in procuring such kind of hydroelectricity. This means that it shows that we are further and firmly committed to attaining our NDCs, right? That is our nationally determined contribution. The second is neighborhood first policy, according to which we will also try to enhance our trade with the neighboring nations. It becomes particularly important at the present because of the Prime Minister's tilt towards Chinese interests. Then energy geopolitics. Because the countries are now being committed to sustainable developmental goals that have to be achieved by 2030, there has been a transition towards clean energy. Now every nation wants to rush forward and go for clean energy procurement. That is why it is being touted as a problem of resources as well, right? This sudden rush. So this is going to shape the energy geopolitics between the various nations. Visit of Vietnamese Prime Minister to India. Recently, for a 3-day visit, the Prime Minister of Vietnam came to India so that the strategic ties between India and Vietnam could be further strengthened. Let us have a look at this issue. So what are the key outcomes of this visit? The first is with respect to comprehensive strategic partnership, the level of ties between India and Vietnam. So there is a new plan of action contained within this comprehensive strategic partnership that held the strategic ties between India and Vietnam since 2016. Right? This plan of action would have to be implemented in the coming 5 years. Now, within this comprehensive strategic partnership, there is collaboration and agreements. 9 agreements have been signed, particularly in collaborating with the sectors like customs, agriculture, legal matters, and so on. Okay. With respect to trade, India and Vietnam have reached an all-time high of $15 billion worth of trade between them. And this was also a highlight of the visit because more items, for example, defense technology, digital technology, and renewable energy, these were also emphasized upon in this visit. Then with respect to financial transactions, the connectivity with respect to digital payment was agreed before the both of the central banks. They are moving forward with digital payment connectivity. Right? India is also, with respect to line of credit is basically when India will extend loans on concessional rates. That is when line of credit is given out. So India has extended $300 million to Vietnam as a line of credit, both with respect to military and developmental objectives under this visit. So these were the key outcomes of the visit. Now let us have a look at the bilateral relations between the two countries. Firstly, there has been cultural and civilizational links with respect to spread of Buddhism. And this was particularly since the Ashokan times. It started there. Right? So, India and Vietnam both have cultural and civilizational links. Then there was peace process in Vietnam, that was particularly with respect to US. So, India was a great supporter of this peace process in Vietnam, even to the extent of embittering the US-India relationship. Right? It was also made the chairman of International Committee of Supervision and Control, that was to establish this peace process activity and put forward the developmental objectives in Vietnam. Then diplomatic relations. India and Vietnam have established their diplomatic relations in 1972, that is with unified Vietnam. Even before this, there were relations between India and Vietnam at the level of consulates. Right? India and Vietnam also have a strategic partnership between them. In 2007, it was a strategic partnership which was elevated to comprehensive strategic partnership in the year 2016. Right? Apart from this, there is trade and economic cooperation between both of these nations. So this amounts to, the bilateral trade amounts to $14.82 billion worth of trade. That is, nearly $15 billion of trade is happening between the countries, and therefore there is a need for enhancing the sectors in which these kind of trade takes place. Right? So there has been considerable trade and economic cooperation in India and Vietnam. With respect to bilateral relations in the defense partnership, there is defense industrial collaboration. This focuses on modernization of the defense industry and also building capacity for having these kind of defense systems, equipments and technologies into place. Okay, so they are also going forward with capacity building as far as defense cooperation is concerned. Then India has also extended line of credit with respect to defense of $600 million to Vietnam. Right? Apart from this, India has also gifted INS Kirpan. This is a indigenously built missile corvette. So this is the kind of collaboration that India and Vietnam have with each other, right? Apart from this, there is military exercise by the name of Winbacks, which provides for considerable cooperation and training to both the military of the nations, right? Then Vietnam had also participated in Milan, that was held in India in February 2024. Right? So these are the bilateral relations between India and Vietnam. Visit of President to New Zealand, Timor-Leste and Fiji. So recently, President Draupadi Murmu went and visited these nations, that is Timor-Leste, Fiji and New Zealand. So with respect to our exam, it is important to know where are the geographical locations of these countries, right? Now also let us analyze what all were highlighted within this visit. So what were the highlights of this presidential visit? First, with respect to Fiji, President was awarded with the highest civilian award, that was Companion of Order of Fiji. In her address to the nation, the President highlighted the contribution of Garmityas. Garmityas is a word that is derived from the English word that is agreement. Okay, so agreement was formed into Garmits, and the persons holding this agreement would be called a Garmitya, right? So Garmityas, who were they? They were basically the indentured laborers who were migrating from British India to the plantations in Fiji. Okay, they were primarily going there to work as a laborer. Okay, and therefore there were agreements. These agreements stated for what length were they going to stay in Fiji plantations and work there, and what are the conditions attached to their return to the British India, right? So the President had highlighted that this kind of contribution has contributed to the society and economy of Fiji for 145 years. The second presidential visit was to New Zealand. So the President addressed the New Zealand National Education Conference, and within this conference, India was also recognized as country of honor. This visit also affirmed that India is going to open a consulate in Auckland. This would definitely lead to strengthening of diplomatic ties and further engagement with Indian diaspora. With respect to Timor-Leste, that is the visit by President to the third country, there were establishment of embassy in the capital of Timor-Leste, that is in its capital known as Delhi, right? And they also have a resident mission, that is Timor-Leste also has a resident mission in New Delhi, that is the capital of India, right? Also, with establishment of embassy in Timor-Leste, there would be simplification of attaining visas for the population from this country. Why? Because earlier, since there was no embassy that was there was no establishment of diplomatic relations, and therefore people from this country had to acquire such visas from Indonesia. Now, with the establishment of this embassy, these visas would be made available and it would be convenient for migration for various purposes, whether it is tourism, whether it is education, or any other medical tourism as well, right? So these are the President visit to these three nations. This is all that you should know about the President visit. And with this, we come to an end of recitals for the August 2024 module. Thank you.